So originally from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, see, already. Sergey Jivetin immigrated to the States and has been a resident since 1992. He now lives in the fantastic design hub that is New York and is an alumnus of both Parsons School of Design and State University of New York. He's worked as an educator, a jeweler, and even as an advanced technologies coordinator. I'm not really sure what that is, so you may want to ask him. He's been the recipient of honors such as the Emerging Artist Award, the Herbert Hoffman Prize, and the Fellowship in Craft from the New York Foundation for the Arts. In addition to his masterful use of traditional metalsmithing techniques and materials, Sergey is a relentless and inquisitive creator. From eggshells and Kevlar to wishbones and steel, he is a virtuoso of exploratory materials and cutting-edge design. Not just a jeweler, but an educator, an engineer, and heck, a pretty bloody interesting person. Sergey is a fantastic example of the modern-day Renaissance man, pursuing excellence and innovation in all that he does. It is my great pleasure to introduce the creative, the innovative, Sergey Jivetin.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. First, I'd like to thank the Metals Guild for inviting me. And I also want to thank the presenters who came before me today and for completely confusing me in my practice and giving me so much food for thought and so much information and so much amazing, interesting approaches to making. And I guess, I'll be probably absorbing and digesting that information for the next year or two. So I hope you guys are actually feeling the same because I guess the point of art is to digest what we have around us and then somehow create something unique and individual and personal. So as Tara mentioned, I came from Uzbekistan and I came here when I was a young boy, 14, and went to high school, but I was always interested in miniature. Never specifically jewelry, but anything that had to do with small scale. So I went through Parsons School of Design. Initially, I majored in illustration because I love drawing, I like graphic work. But then found the metals program to be exactly what I wanted to do, and kind of stayed with it. Went to CMU New Paltz with professors Jamie Bennett and Myra English Gray. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with that school, but it's like a mafia now everywhere. The graduates of the school are everywhere. But it was a fantastic program that I really enjoyed doing, but the problem was I did not end up doing any jewelry for my pieces. I only did sculpture. And because I really wanted to experiment. I wanted to break from what I was doing before, and I just wanted to see, how far I can go, and whether or not these challenges are going to be what I really wanted to do. Now, before I go and actually show the work, I want to ask you guys to kind of ask questions as I go along, because there is a few things that I might assume, but you guys might just really need to know about the pieces. So just shout the questions out, and it's fine with me. I'll try to answer to the best of my abilities. All right? Okay. So I guess the first series that I want to introduce came after grad school, and I really wanted to look back to my character, I guess my identity, and the first thing that obviously came to mind is the fact that I'm a migrant. I am I was transplanted from one place and ended up in another. So one of the things that I realized was that I like to communicate with certain symbols that are rather universal and universally recognizable. So even though I initially started working with metal basically from scratch, with raw materials, I later found that the materials that already have unique associations could speak a lot more to what I wanted to say, and I could use them more efficiently. So this series was actually made. The main material was watch hands, and the skeletal material is generally sterling silver or steel. So I guess I looked at a watch hand as this ultimate universal symbol. It represents sort of a vector, a direction, but it also has, I guess it has a sharp point, which I liked. It also has a dimension. It has sort of I guess a silhouette in one dimension, and then it's almost invisible in the other dimension. So I kind of started playing around with them to see what develops. And one of the things that I really wanted to have the work represent, or have the work generate, was the feeling of density. At the time, I lived in New York City, in Brooklyn, and for me, the multitude, or like the density of I guess the space, the people around me was something of a factor, and I guess I wanted to convey that feeling in these pieces. So this piece is about 2 inches by 2 inches and about half an inch high. It's titled Pentagon. Another pentagon, also watch hands. And you guys kind of, right, most of you are makers here, so you can pretty much figure out how the piece is built, right? There's a central core, and then the watch hands are pressure fitted and then kind of expanded onto one or the other side. Pretty simple. I like simplicity and elegance. My father is a scientist, and he always told me that simplicity is generally, the simplest solution is the most beautiful one, and I guess it stuck with me, and I guess that's what Kristen talked about in her lecture earlier. So most of these structures I envisioned as almost these nodes on migration maps, as these like little convergences, intersections. And then I drew from, let's say, the way that animals create structure, or the way that, let's say, certain nomadic tribes create structures, like yurts and I guess certain towers and certain dwellings. This actually, in most of these, I couldn't really use hot construction, so most of these are cold construction, because the watch hands themselves, they have a coating, and so they're either pressure fitted or in some way mechanically connected to the base. In this case, they're all sitting on individual silver posts, and the friction between the watch hands is what's holding the pieces together. So it's technically, there is pretty much nothing except the mechanical interlacing of the hands that's holding the piece together. They are wearable. However, it's a difficult question for me to answer, and I will go a little bit more in depth as far as my ideology behind works like this, and whether or not they actually belong in the format of jewelry or not. But I think in all of these pieces, the most important thing for me was that they are handheld. So they are, so you participate with them, not just visually, but in a very physical, tactile way. As long as they're touched, that was enough of an art experience for me. This piece is called Battle Formation, and it's based on the square formation, the infantry formation in the Napoleonic Wars and earlier. where this would pretty much be the last resort when you're surrounded and kind of you basically giving your last breath away. But that's a little bit of how I felt, I guess, living in a city and having a sort of spikes coming out. And actually, it felt like everyone around me had spikes coming out, and I did not want to let anybody in. So I actually think it relates very much to the sort of the need for immigrant societies to or to just basically survive and not to let anybody else in because it would interfere with their survival. I don't know, I might be wrong, but that was my experience, at least as far as the Russian immigrant community in New York. This piece is also, I call it the shield, and I guess it invokes the idea of armor, and I think there's about 25 layers of wash hands that are stacked one on top of the other. The material itself, I started by simply collecting wash hands from eBay, but then it turns out that I really needed a lot more, and I started to, first I contacted the Swiss manufacturer, but it turned out to be such an expensive proposition that I just couldn't make it work in a scale that I wanted to. So I had to go with a Hong Kong manufacturer, but they were really nice in the sense that I was able to get all the styles that I need in exactly the same size, or exactly the size that I want, and exactly the color that I wanted to. So that actually gave me quite a few options. So I guess there are always alternatives, even though they might come from China. Another piece, and I really thought about this as like an intersection, and the optical illusion that happens, I guess, when the two planes meet. This is about 4 inches by 4 inches and an inch in depth. And it's just simply, the wash hands as, if you put them on a curve, they produce this pretty remarkable optical illusion. So this is me way back when, playing in my studio in the basement with all the wash hands. And I think overall I bought about 80,000 wash hands. And so that was quite a few to work with, but I think it was at that time when I got a microscope, simply because I did not want to lose my vision. So in that sense, I was kind of, and I still have my vision, so I guess I thank that tool for it. Now this is another part of the studio, the machine shop that I have. And that also has been one of the most valuable tools in the studio. One of the things that I really love about using machine tools, but simple machine tools, is the fact that there is a little bit more control, but you are still very much in the art making mode. I mean, it's not, the machine is not taking over what you're going to be doing. You're always guiding the machine to do it, as opposed to, let's say, a CNC machine that will just, you punch the program in and it just runs the program over and over again. So I always enjoy that, that sense of control, sense of participation with a mechanism or with a machine, and I guess allowing it to be, to be used as a medium between me and the piece. So, an aluminum cloud. Now, one thing I really wanted to kind of address in this lecture was the question that was asked of us, and the question was, how do you find balance? And I kind of I thought about it, and I decided that I would be like the last person to to show you what a balance is, because I do not have any balance. There is no equilibrium in my practice. It always swings one way and then just as rapidly swings the other way. So it never stops, and I always alternate between different projects as they come along. It's sometimes simply because of necessity. I generally do not have I do not have extra income, so I'm always kind of on a day-to-day survival mode. So whenever there's a project, I feel like I have to take it, but then I always try to make it in such a way that my individuality and my, I guess, sense of artistic expression comes through. So this is one of the side projects that I mentioned, and this is a blade holder for a haircutting design house in New York. And basically the woman who commissioned me for these is a master use of blades, razor blades for carving hair. And so she wanted this, I guess, a handle for, that would be almost this Jackson Pollock-like movements. And I guess she wanted to be, to feel like a real artist, so she wanted a brush. So, we worked with her on the different, I guess, the different ways that she can, she can use the gestural quality and actually be a functional object as well, a functional tool. This is forged aluminum, and then the holder is stainless steel. And then I also had to engrave a logo. That was back when the CNC machines were really still too expensive. So like all the lettering, I had to engrave. Now this is another project which I kind of hesitated to show simply because it's not really patented yet. So, but I'm showing you only the initial sketch for this, and because all the other variations are still technically supposed to be in mystery to everybody else. But a friend of mine who is an anesthesiologist, he asked me on several occasions to make his practice easier, and he had a few ideas in mind, and I basically ended up working with him on a few of these devices. He is a pain management practitioner, and this particular device is actually a guide for the needle for radioscopy, I think it's like an epidural procedure, right? You guys are familiar with that? Do we have any doctors around who can? Okay. So basically, this device actually, it's almost an extension of a doctor's hand, because usually these procedures are done with under X-ray. So the doctor does not want to put his hand right where the machine is, right where the radiation is. So this is like an extension of the hand. And I ended up going through it. It ended up going through like 5 or 6 different versions before it became a full-blown product. So this is another project I worked with the same doctor, and this actually I can't show you because it's already patented, and it actually is hitting the market soon. So this is a device that again is meant to help a doctor and the patient basically for these procedures. And again, it went through quite a few different modifications. I mean, we actually had to build several prototypes, full-size prototypes, and test these out thoroughly before we ended up with the final one. And so you see, I think this is the first manifestation. The first at the top, you see the first drawing for it, and then the second. That is the second, and that is the second modification. So you can see how different the basic principle stayed the same, but the design changed quite a bit. So the seat was supposed to expand the spine to open the inter-disc spaces. And this is the final manifestation of the device. And it ended up actually being carbon fiber, which is, I actually started on carbon fiber with my eggs first, and then it ended up in this piece, not the other way around. So, this is just for the future. Some of these projects, these took years to actually manifest. So, we started on the first prototype like 4 years ago, and we just finished with this one a year and a half ago. So. Now, this brings me to my next series of pieces, and you'll see a little bit as to why I put them in such progression. And the series is called Lineare, and the basic material for the whole series is syringe needles. And I guess it's all the exposure to the me working with the needles for the devices that got inspired. And I'm going to go back to the engravings a little bit later, but first I wanted to show a little bit about how the pieces are made. And as you can see, basically the needles are spliced and then drilled and then strung. Now the second material that I use in this series is a shape memory metal. It's called nitinol. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but the pieces outside in the case that you've probably seen, the very fine wire, that is that material. And it's a nickel titanium alloy, and it's basically, it's considered the most resilient metal on Earth at this point. So I use it because it gives me so much flexibility with like super fine size, and it basically becomes almost invisible when I want it to be invisible. So the structure that you see here, after you string all of these segments together, it becomes pretty flexible. So you have this almost a feel of fabric in your hands in one dimension, while it's incredibly rigid in the other dimension. So I'm going to go back a little bit and show the way that the series was displayed. The first series, the watch hands, I initially intended it to be displayed on very large maps of migrations, like maps of animal migrations, maps of bird migrations, like whale migrations, and then human migrations, kind of collaged together, where the pieces, the brooches would be, or like sitting at like certain nodes of convergences. But I actually, because I really didn't have space, I wasn't offered space to do a show, that series kind of ended up with not having an installation type of presentation. So I guess it still exists as individual pieces, but in this one I actually was able to utilize the space to a much greater extent. So it's the collage, the background that you see behind the pieces. It's 2 feet high and 8 feet long, and it is I guess it was done in Photoshop from. It's a collage of old engravings from old books. However, like all of them refer to a shade, sort of a drawing process that's called shading, when you actually delineate a three-dimensional form, three-dimensional volume on the page. So for me, these pieces, like for example the skulls, the head, and the beautiful lines that you see, creating the areas of light and dark. And now on this screen, it's also pixelated. So I guess that's another dimension to it, which I didn't intend on. So this is one of the first pieces in the series, and again, it kind of referred to the cupola form, the form that I guess stayed with me from some of the churches that I've seen in Russia and some of the churches throughout the world. And for me, I guess shading it in metal, shading that form in metal, and giving it slight dimensionality, but more tactility, allowed me to participate with something, to participate with that form, to actually hold it, to caress it, to experience it. Because most of the architectural forms that I saw, forms like this, they are so delicious that I wanted to touch them, seriously. So, there is something about, I don't know, around the form, perhaps it's a breast, perhaps it's something else, but it's just so inviting. And I think a representation of it for me really stuck in mind. So I wanted to actually have that experience, or at least I wanted the viewer to have that experience with the piece. But instead of actually building a three-dimensional form, replicating that form, I actually wanted to retain a little bit of mystery. I don't know if it makes any sense, but it's still, even though you touch it, that form is still just out of your reach. I mean, you cannot fully grasp it. So, again, it remains a paradox, even though you have reached it and are holding it in your hands. Another piece. I don't know if you guys can see from where you're sitting, but the material on the left is a feather, right? Is that visible? Is that blending too much with the background? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. I have a pointer right there. So in this instance, I always feel very ambiguous, I guess, about bringing a second material, and it really has to fit within the idea of the original idea of the series, and then it has to expand on the idea of each individual piece. So I guess it takes me a lot of time and a lot of thought to come up with the perfect pairing, the perfect match for it. So I think in this case, the softness of the feather will, complement nicely with the rigidity of the shadow that I wanted the piece to invoke. Again, I'm not sure if that is visible, but there are engraved lines here on this piece that are a little bit on each of the sides that are alluding to the sort of the shading of form, but the form is pretty much flat. And that's silver and stainless steel. I guess that would be very similar to, the Corinthian columns and the Ionic columns. They're always out of reach. A vase form. And this is how they actually looked when they presented on the background. Some of them really blended in, and some of them stood out a little bit. So that actually, created much more of a paradox. And kind of played around with the audience. I really like to consider the audience when I make a piece. And I think that's perhaps a little bit, I guess, I'm not really considering the audience when the piece is being worn. I'm considering the audience when the piece is being presented and the first experience that the person will have with the piece. So, and then after that first experience has happened to me, probably it doesn't really matter whether the piece is actually worn or the piece is not. I would rather it be presented in an original setting, but I guess it doesn't work out that way if you want to sell pieces. So I wish at some point I can just bring all of these pieces together again and present them on the background sometime in the future, but I guess that's not going to happen anytime soon. So this is another view from the same installation. Another piece. The structure you see are, again, nitinol and syringe needles, and it's pretty flexible. This is a very flexible piece. Little sketches, almost like very quick gestural drawings in wire. A little bit more structured drawing in wire. This has like 4 or 5 layers of wire that are, I guess, stacked on top of each other and create that optical illusion. and the core is silver. And this is about 2 inches high. Another piece, and this is silicone that is just pushed through the gaps between the syringe needles. Now, this piece I actually meant as a performance piece. There's actually 2 of them. One is a little bit larger and the other a little bit smaller. So it's composed of probably, the feet itself is 24 inches long. So it's composed of like 10,000 segments of wire that has been drilled, of needles that are drilled and then strung side by side. And it's kind of translucent. That was an interesting effect that I didn't count on. So it's actually a participatory piece. And at the opening, I unrolled it and then rolled it back, unrolled it, rolled it back. But for me, it was the switch between dimensions. That was the most interesting. It was to show that a piece can exist as both, let's say, a solid form and as a drawing of that same form. I love that duality. I love that paradox that one piece can do both. But again, it might need the participation of the artist to actually do that, or a wearer for that matter. So this brings me to the next series of pieces that I did, and this is called Singularities. And obviously, right, all of you are familiar with the solid number 2. No, nobody uses number 2. You guys are more for 0. Is this a 0 crowd? We don't want the 0 crowd here. All right, so basically, I just wanted to stretch one of the teeth into this, I guess, growth form. And I had to build a whole apparatus to do that. So you can see how I used the C-clamp and automatic, a hammer handpiece to create an automatic hammer. And I work on the microscope and basically just forge it, anneal it. At first I anneal the subblade and then forge the piece into this fine wire. So, and this kind of led me to the whole series of pieces. And ended up, actually, that same exact, I guess, principle led me to this piece. And the piece is about 25 feet long. And it's composed of 100 subblades that are encased in acrylic tubing. And there is 12 little segments where there is like something going on with the subblades. The monotony of the wave of the subblade has been altered somehow. So in most of these, I actually have not used my forging jig. I ended up actually soldering little segments on top of it, but because I just did not have enough metal to be able to stretch everything, in a form that was remotely visible to the naked eye. So these are some of the other alterations. I call these singularities, and to me they just represented like break from oppression, from monotony, and it was actually a lot of fun using the tubing, glass, to blow glass. So this is how the piece was presented in the exhibition. It was also, there is some more pieces in there on the table that you see, but basically the whole necklace was expanded over the length of the table, and actually over the periphery of the table, and there were 12 viewing stations where you were able to, to look at each one of the singularity and, I guess continue on and see the whole exhibition using that method. And this happened at the Juliersburg in DC. the other pieces in the series, and I'm going to go a little bit more. There is better shots, but I wanted to show you how the other pieces are presented in the petri dishes or in some sort of scientific apparatus, sort of holder or a device. So this is actually a bracelet, and each one of the sections refers to filigree, which is I guess there was many different versions of filigree, and this probably would be a Russian version. I don't know exactly, or I mean maybe Uzbek version. I don't know the origins of specific design. So this is how the bracelet opens, but I'm going to go back to show you the actual method of construction. So basically the wire, each one of the segments has about 36 blades that are soldered in a single line, and then they are just kind of woven into these forms, just like a filigree would be, and then soldered into its own enclosure, and then bent. This is the back, or the back mechanism. And again, this is how it's worn. Another piece in the series, and 4 of the 5 sections are rolled up saw blades, and then the other one is cotton thread. Again, I wanted to highlight, contrast, I guess the hardness of the steel, of the teeth, with the softness of the cotton. Say it again? I mean, if you put it in water, yeah, it will rust. Or if you put it in a very wet environment, yes, it will. I mean, I tried lacquering some of the pieces, but they just did not look as good. So, I mean, I kept them as is. Oh yeah, and this is a bracelet. It opens from the inside. This piece actually has no soldering at all, and it kind of refers to the Russian, the Soviet Union, I guess the crest. And for me, it was a very potent metaphor of how these unique units are held together simply by friction and by force. So I guess the saw blades here are just woven, twisted, bent, and that's the only force that's holding it together. And I expanded on that same format, and it actually became a much larger necklace. And this is a little bit more of a detail. Can you guys see okay? Is this too dark maybe? No? It's good? All right. Feels a little too dark from where I'm standing. And then a very simple piece. Just, I think 3 or 4 dozen saw blades that are just bent into a knot. This piece actually has a closure. It's very flexible in I guess in its dimension. So the one protruding saw blade that's a little bit longer is the closure for the whole mechanism. And so I think I included the back shot of it as well. Oh no, I didn't. I'm sorry. But it has the front and the back. Another piece. And then I always have a few pieces which are just the most simple, but I actually find them the most potent and the most interesting. So it's just a sharp jaws, one saw blade. It was a necklace, yeah. It was meant actually to be located right here. So. And I guess another piece, and it's not one of my favorite pieces, but I wanted to show you the transition to the next series. And this is where I really, for some strange reason, happened upon the silhouette of a cloud motif, and which I thought has a lot of interesting possibilities. And I guess I stayed with it for the next series. Yep. Okay. So this will be the next series. It's called the Cumulus. And it's composed of eggshell and carbon fiber, sliced with diamond tools, and I guess glued together to form these. These are all pieces that I guess most of them are individual and they pivot, so they kind of flow along the body. And this is the lock for it. They're lined with carbon fiber, so that makes them pretty much bulletproof. Another piece in the series. And that's white coral and fishing hooks. This material, this piece actually took the longest of all the pieces, even though it might look the simplest. I happened upon some material which was raw ivory, just raw flat slices of ivory, and because the material has such history and such negative associations, I really wanted to find the right pairing for it. And after going through like 20 or 30 different choices, I just picked the simplest one, and I think it turned out to be the best. And it's forged iron hooks, and to me they allude to shackles. And then nails. Broken china handles, and then bathroom sealer. CFL light bulbs, and actually candle wax inside, and filament. Eyeglasses and eyelashes, false eyelashes. Nightingale, that same shape and every metal, and seed pearls and lace. Human hair and chain. And this piece actually shows you how the construction of the egg and carbon fiber is made. So there's about 2 millimeter thick layer of carbon fiber that's lining the eggs from the inside, and then it's cooked. Some more pieces from the same series, and this just shows how many eggs I actually went through. It was, most of my refrigerator was actually taken up by the eggs. No, I couldn't. That was too much. I would have been dead from cholesterol. So, and I used the rotisserie oven to actually to rotate the eggs as they were drying. One of the interesting things that happened when I was working with the eggshell is that I was able to open it like a shell, as if it was just absolutely like paper. I was able to cut it, and I was able to do anything with it. But I'm just going to go a little bit more quickly to the next series of pieces. And actually, no, not the next series of pieces. This is the last piece from the same series. It just took a lot longer to actually finish. But it's wishbones and steel. And actually, they were initially repair needles, but I needed to elongate them. So I was able to find a process to soak the wishbones and remove most of the calcium from them and make them flexible. And they ended up in this piece. And the joints are the ends of the needles that are forged and then bent into the form. Now, this is a little bit more of our studio. I share a studio with my life partner, Jen Trask, and this is some of her work. And but we do share some of the processes. that come along that we happen to stumble upon. And this is one of the pieces for her new series, the nests, and we soaked bones in vinegar and actually made them flexible, and then put them on forms, and it ended up in these beautiful nests that are made from bone. The tulip. Once you soak them, they become very soft and flexible, and then you just cut them with scissors. And I happen to have so many eggs in the studio, we use them as molds. And then that's the final piece, the tulip. And these are some of the larger pieces that Jen does, and the flowers, they end up in these frames, and then we alter the frames. So I participate in her work a little bit. And then this is another project that's on the side, the Pave. We're actually opening a school for stone setters, and this is taking up most of my time right now. And there's a created set of tools that are very useful for the stone setters, and are actually opening up a space in Manhattan to teach stone setters using microscopes and cameras and all the high-tech equipment. And that would be it. Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Oh, perfect. Questions? No, the steel needles in the second series, the Lineare, they're just strong. There was no, they're not soldered at all. They just basically, like, I use them as beads in a sense. What do I use to, when I do solder? Oh, I just use regular, torches, the acetylene torch. I do have a hydroflux, which is the water torch, but I found it to be, used better for some applications than other. But all of these processes can pretty much be done with any of the torches that we have, or the kiln, for that matter.
What would you classify as the hardest or most complicated material that you work with?
I think nitinol, simply because it cannot be soldered at all. But I think that's about it. It's just a matter of how much time you spend with experimenting and what the idea is. Like I firmly believe that you can use pretty much any material to anything that you want to do. Each one does have its limits, but as far as how hard it is or how, I think you'll be able to figure out. Yes? Yes. Well, after I slice all the segments, I slice every other one at the node, at the tip, and then I drill it, and then I put a steel pin through it, and then I use the same epoxy that I've used for carbon fiber to, I guess, hold it together. It's not as strong as the original carbon fiber, but because of the pin, it's not going to fall apart as easily. So, yeah, I wish there was a way to actually cut everything and it would just become this one chain, but no way. Basically, if you guys know the regular separating discs, they're about an inch in diameter. So what I do is I use a diamond disc to actually thin those discs to a very fine point, and just use the disc to start the hole and go almost all of the way through. Then I use very fine drill bit to just hand finish it at specific angles. Sometimes, like for the piece that was like how many feet long, I actually built a jig that allowed me to drill at much more, because all of the spacing on that particular piece was even. So I just, build a jig, and I use two flexible shafts to just, kind of use it. I find that when you do work on a very, like, something that'll take forever, you just have to get into the zone, like, I guess, meditative zone, and it just you become a machine. But sometimes it works for me, but, it's also like frequent breaks. And tea helps. Anyone else? Well, actually, another interesting connection is that nitinol is used for surgeries right now as well, and in medical, it's used as stents to actually keep the arteries open when you remove the plaque. So they have it in mesh form. Yeah, they have it in mesh form. But so I had surgeons buy my nitinol rings because they really loved the fact that that same material is actually used for a different purpose. Exactly, dentists use it. Yeah, and I mean NASA uses it. It was originally intended as it was created by Naval Ordnance Labs. So it was created for military purpose and ended up, I think, in an international space station. But then it kind of made its way to high-tech processes, and it's still pretty expensive to buy, but it's very widely available. But that material has a lot of limits to what it can do. So. Sweet. Which artists? Quite a few. I actually relate right now to the art that is much bigger than I'm used to the scale that I'm working on. And I'm actually thinking of dropping everything and just do installation pieces. But I'll have to think about that decision for a little bit more time. I guess, the exhibition that you guys, I don't know if you guys have, those of you who have come to the reception yesterday, Timothy Horn had some fantastic work in the Bellevue Art Museum on the second floor. And there was another metalsmith. I'm blanking on the name, but it's basically I relate to the art that actually engages with the audience and transforms, and it actually gives you a real, tangible art experience. In a sense that it somehow alters your mode of thinking, or it alters your understanding of the space that it's in, and so I feel actually one of the reasons why I like miniature scale is it draws you into this world, and it allows you to just completely almost forget what's going around you. And for me, the best art experience is actually when I happen upon seeing something in a store window, and it intrigues me so much that I forget that the glass is there, and I bump my head in the glass. and to me, that is the perfect art experience. So. Is that it? Excellent. Thank you very much.